Good evening, everyone. I'm Sue-Ann Hung, President and CEO for the Center for Asian Pacific American Women.
And I'm Ken Lee. I'm the CEO of OCA Asian Pacific American Advocates.
Thank you for joining us tonight for day 4 of our conference. It's been a rich conference so far, and there's been so much learning from our amazing speakers. But before we begin tonight, we want to extend our sincere apologies for the inappropriate images and profanities that our attendees and panelists were subjected to during one of our Zoom panel sessions, which was hacked by unknown sources yesterday. We're so disheartened, disappointed, and outraged with this demonstration of such hateful behavior. The well-being and safety of our panelists and attendees are the utmost important to us. Thank you to our moderators and panelists for demonstrating their professionalism during this difficult incident. There will be additional follow-up in the coming days.
A formal complaint has been filed with Zoom today after consulting with our OCA General Counsel. We will be reporting the incident to law enforcement to take action to the fullest extent of the law. We have taken appropriate actions to assure that integrity of our conference going forward. We have also continued to conduct internal process reviews to ensure that we take appropriate security measures of our program to assure the safety and security of our panelists and attendees. This showcases the importance and urgency of our work, developing, elevating, and providing support for women of color and women in general. This is critical, and we will learn, educate, and move forward.
Thank you, Ken. And let me tell you, the rest of the conference and tonight especially, we have amazing, strong, vibrant, powerful women, and this incident is not going to stop us. So with that, it is all about our theme tonight of our future strategies for moving forward. And to open this session, let me talk to you a little bit about our very special guest tonight, who we are so honored to have. Dr. Fawn Sharp is serving her 5th term as president of the Quinault Indian Nation. She's the president of the Affiliate Tribes of Northwest Indians, an organization established in 1953 that represents 57 Northwest tribal governments, and the president for the National Congress of American Indians, an organization established in 1944, representing 566 tribal nations. And she's also a member of the Still in Leaders, and I am so honored to have her with us tonight, Dr. Fawn Sharp.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. I'm so incredibly happy to be here, and looking back on the years that I've spent in leadership, who would have thought? When I was a young girl, I wanted to grow up to become an attorney, and had an opportunity to go to college at a young age. I was 15 years old when I graduated from high school, moved away from home. I spent a good decade away before coming back to my community, and in that time, I just had so many extraordinary experiences all across the country. I had a chance to study international human rights law outside of the United States, and all of those experiences prepared me to lead the Quinault Nation at a time when I was a young mother. I had a son who was only a year old. He's now 16, and his entire life has been spent with me, and he's had a chance to grow up to meet other tribal leaders. He spent Christmas in the White House with President Obama and the First Lady. I mean, just the experiences that we have as mothers in trying to balance everything. I've been just so very blessed to not only have the honor and privilege of serving tribal nations, but to know that we have so many friends and allies that they too are entering their professional years as mothers, trying to balance everything. And so I think that's such an incredible testament. And venues like this, where we're able to share our experiences, uphold each other, and just say, yes, I've had that same experience. And we just find that there's so much strength and resilience, as well as wisdom and advice, and just that opportunity to, in the midst of a crazy world, to just stop and enjoy the company of others. And so I'm so very grateful for this opportunity to be able to talk a little this evening. And I would really like to share with you the experiences of my nation in dealing with COVID-19. I had a preliminary conversation before going live that we, early in the pandemic, were just confronted with the reality that it's likely we're on our own. Tribal nations did not have access to the National Strategic Stockpile for PPE. We didn't have access to testing. Anything that was deployed statewide was going to large urban areas. And it was quite clear early that we were in a place where we had to defend ourselves. And I just realized that so many of our ancestors have gone through much worse with much less, and it's within us. And I think that's the part of leadership where, when, as a woman leader, you bring that nurturing part of the leadership attributes to the table, because I felt like a mama bear, not only for my tribal nation, but the 574 tribal nations across the country who were facing life and death circumstances with a pandemic. And so these are the types of challenges that we have. And I think the women leaders of our generation have been called because the challenges of our generation are apocalyptic. When you consider not only the pandemic, but climate change, every one of these are symptoms of a much deeper imbalance that didn't begin in 2020. It didn't begin a lifetime ago. It began centuries ago. And when we are called upon our Almighty Creator to emerge into positions of leadership and to be the ones who help guide our children, our communities, our families, whichever sector you might work in, this is a sacred moment, a sacred time, and only those who are gifted, and it is our generation, and I believe we have everything within us to meet the challenges. And so when I have an opportunity to work not only within Indian country, but to build alliances and build partnerships, I know that that's part of a necessary component to our success. We lift up each other. We're the voices, we hear the voices. And that's the beauty and strength of this country, that when I think about all the things that can go wrong and have gone wrong, and the foundations of this country that have been shaken the last few years, and it seems like everything is unhinged from that foundation of truth, of equity, of diversity, of inclusion. But now this country is prepared to reconcile our way of life, reconcile all of those things that we haven't even created public space to have some of the critical conversations. And anytime I work in very challenging sectors, whether it's within business, whether it's within colleges and universities or government, I'm finding that the women leaders in those sectors have that part of leadership that looks toward nurturing the whole and nurturing all of our community, and recognizing that we are stronger together. We are stronger in our diverse sectors. And so I was just so very happy and honored to be able to have an opportunity to share some of the experiences that we have and what's on the horizon for our sovereign tribal nations. And I just couldn't be more excited about coming out of an era, a very dark era, and knowing that we have every opportunity to emerge from these multiple apocalyptic challenges more resilient, stronger, more unified, and better prepared to face the next generation of challenges, and to prepare those young girls who are looking up to us as role models, as leaders, and witnessing our President of the United States emerge as a woman leader, as a woman from a minority community. Anything is possible. And so this is a very exciting time for us to come together, to have these type of conversations, to know the challenges are seemingly impossible, but to know we have a very storied, strong history, and together, each and every community that is represented in these spaces, we have that unique history. We have not only multi-generational trauma and pain and suffering, we have multi-generational strength, knowledge, and wisdom. And as women leaders, we are uniquely positioned to bring that perspective to the table, to not only lead our respective communities through some of the most trying and challenging times, but when we can share our experiences within our communities and we come together and we start to find those things that bind us, those common core characteristics, traits, passions, experiences, that will only fuel us to continue to meet the challenges beyond this generation and to prepare that next generation. And so I'm just so very grateful and honored to have the opportunity to share some thoughts from my community and perspectives, but we are all here called at a sacred time, a sacred place. We are uniquely gifted and we have every opportunity to not only meet these challenges, but to rise together to greater heights. So I'm so grateful. Thank you. Siakwel.
President Sharp, it's so inspiring to see you in the position that you are in to make a difference. And you talk about nurturing community, but I think of it also as compassionate leadership. And I think we bring that to the table. So we are so honored to have you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Siakwel.
All right, so next we have a two incredible women who are going to do a fireside chat. And it's called Success Redefined, Where Do We Go From Here? Outlook, Opportunities, and Pivoting. And I don't want to overuse the word pivoting, but that is what it's been the last year. But these two incredible women are doing some wonderful things that they will share with us. And so let me introduce you. First, let me introduce you to Ms. Nellie Gallant. She is a media entrepreneur, New York Times best-selling author. She is self-made media entrepreneur and was the first president of a US television network, Telemundo, where she began as an intern. An Emmy Award-winning producer for over 700 television shows in English and Spanish, including the hit reality series, The Swan for 20th Century Fox, where she produced through her multimedia company, Gallant Entertainment. Her company also launched over 10 television channels abroad for companies like HBO, ESPN, Fox, MGM, and Sony. She was the first Latina to appear on Celebrity Apprentice. Welcome, Nellie.
Hello there, Sue-Ann. So lovely to be with you.
Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. And now Erica Estrada Bowden. She has over 14 years of experience as an entertainment attorney. And she began her legal career at Warner Music Latin America, first as a legal intern during her last 2 years of law school, and then as an attorney. She went to serve in the Business and Legal Affairs Department at Fox International Channels Latin America for nearly 8 years. And she was also Executive Director of Business and Legal Affairs at Olay Communication Group, where she managed all contractual and legal matters for E! Entertainment Television Latin America. Welcome, Erica.
Hi, Sue-Ann. Thank you so much for having me.
All right,
And
so
hello there, Nellie.
let me start with one question and then I'm going to have you ask each other, right? So Nellie, can you go a little bit more in depth about your background? Because you have a really fascinating background, and Erica, you also do. So we'll start with Nellie.
Well, I think, you know, I as you just said, I published a book called Self-Made, because I think in this moment, what we've all learned is that to make it to the end of our lives, we have to make ourselves over and over again. So I guess that's another word for pivoting, but that's the only way to make it. I think what Sue-Ann was referring to is I always say there's so many crises in our lives. My son was like, this is such a big crisis. And I said, are you kidding me? Life is full of crises. My first crisis happened when I was 5 years old and I had to leave communist Cuba. And my parents left with the shirt off their back and they lost everything. They had college degrees, they came here, they were useless. And they had money in the bank and the banks closed. And so I came here as an immigrant and became, like so many immigrants, the translator, the therapist, the moneymaker. starting at 12 years of age, I had to sell Avon out of my 7th grade locker to help my parents pay for my school. So I think that tells you a little bit. I love because Eric and I both started out as interns and we started at the bottom. But I guess for me, I started making money at a very young age to help my parents. So I think that's the beginning of telling you my first crisis and how I had to pivot from my first crisis.
That's incredible. And how do you think, Nellie, that shaped your outlook on life, on your career? Like I imagine that experience was really impactful in the best and worst of ways, and sort of was your driving force into getting where you are today. So how can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Well, you know what, Erica, I think that I look at it from a psychology point of view, because I went back to school and I got a doctorate in psychology, so everything comes from that place. I think that we all have thematic issues in our lives from our childhood, right? And I think that in my case, that experience sort of changed my whole life, but I think for the better. First of all, being an immigrant is a great thing because you're so empathetic toward your parents, something most kids are not. You walk in the shoes of your parents and you go, oh my God, they've been through so much, I want to help them. And I also think that for me, I realized in my pain, which was my childhood and immigration, is my brand. That is where everything great has come from in my life. I mean, as someone who, by the way, I wasn't the first president of a TV network. I was the first Latina president of a TV network. But, I've made so much money making TV shows about all my issues in life. So I think that your pain can be not just your pain, it could be your guiding light toward your mission and your profit. And so for me, it's all of those things wrapped up in one. I wanted to ask you though, I want to hear all about your career, because it's so hard to be a Latina, and you're actually Asian. I always say I call you a Latina because to me you're Latina. Your name is Latino, but you're Asian. So we want to talk about that. And also what has happened to you in this year of insanity, and how has it affected or changed your outlook and what you do?
Yeah, no, great question. And it's funny because especially living in Miami and having my last name before I got married was Estrada. And so between that and speaking Spanish, people just presume that I'm Latina. And I have to kind of remind them or educate them and say, wait a minute, no, I'm not, I'm Filipina. And I always get, interesting reactions to that. But just to backtrack a little bit, I was born and raised in Durham, North Carolina. I am the oldest of 3 kids to 2 Filipino immigrant parents. So I'm first generation Asian American. And growing up, I was very in touch with my Filipino heritage. Rice was a staple for dinner every night. There were a lot of Catholic Filipino traditions that we honored and observed growing up, and it was very much a part of my childhood and who I am today. And as a mother now of 2 girls, ages 6.5 and 4.5, I'm trying to instill a lot of those traditions and values in the 2 of them. Filipino culture is very matriarchal, and there's quite a bit of deference to the mother and the female figure in the household. And so I witnessed that firsthand. I mean, for the better part of her career and for most of my childhood and teenhood, my mom earned more money than my dad. And they both had careers as medical technologists. And so in our household, it was very commonplace to be an ambitious woman. And my sister and I had, that ideal role model in my mom, just seeing her. She's 4 feet 11.5 in stature, but a titan in personality and in her ambition and in her will to protect her family, as well as instill in them everything that she could, and based on everything that she learned in her life. So the one message that has been ingrained in me, and I think my sister and brother would agree, was that education is the one thing that no one can take away from you. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of the motto, the unspoken motto in our family. They always pushed us to aim higher, to achieve more, to achieve better. And they sacrificed a lot in order for us to be able to do that. You know, we were middle class, but there were 3 of us, and you know, they sent us all to private schools, private universities. So we were expensive, but they looked at us as an investment, right? And you know, I as the good Filipino child, I aimed to do just that and focus on my studies and aim higher. And I think that work ethic and that desire to continue to achieve has seeped into how I navigate my career as an entertainment and media attorney. So I've always had a knack for languages, and I learned Spanish in high school and then majored in it in college. And I didn't know when I majored in it in college that I would end up using it in my day-to-day work as a professional. You know, living now in Miami and having worked here for over 14 years and primarily working in Latin America focused or US Hispanic focused businesses, you know, Spanish is a very, very important tool to have under your belt. And so I'm grateful that I'm able to use it. And I think my Spanish professors and teachers would be proud that it turned into something of use. So that's been helpful throughout my career as well. I know we'll get into it later in terms of how we're sort of navigating this pandemic and how we've managed crisis and as a result. But I wanted to talk to you first and ask you first about, you know, throughout the conference this week, there's been a lot of talk and insight about what women have been facing throughout the pandemic. So how are you navigating through this time? What have you been doing? And you know, to your earlier point about your childhood and your upbringing, I imagine that a lot of what you learned and what you had to go through has made this sort of easy peasy for you in many ways, or that, you know, in ways that you can sort of re-exercise those muscles. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I think you and I both have talked, you know, that first of all, the pandemic changed how we do business, right? We're all home. You're home with 2 little girls. You know, we have a lot of interruptions. For me, that part of it has been a blessing because I traveled all the time. And now I've actually, I feel healthier than I used to feel because I was on airplanes all the time. But I think that, you know, based on what I told you from before, I think I am someone who's used to crisis in a way. And so, you know, to me, everything I talk about to women is financial empowerment. And I always say, no, you are not empowered as a woman if you're not financially self-reliant. And that is, to me, the most important thing that we should focus on, because I think I arrived to this crisis with grace. And that's what we all should aspire to. Because frankly, I had money put away. I had money put away in the bank. I had invested my money. I had done all those things. And so one of the things that you know, I hope to talk about today is how do we really own where we are today, understand that maybe not all of us arrived to this pandemic with grace. And, you know, so many of us have been depressed, and that's normal, or feeling scared, and that's normal. But how do we plan better so that the next crisis, because if you really look at it, you know, I'm older and wiser, I can tell you that crises come in our lives a lot. Right? Like if you look at it, we had 9/11. I'm just going 20 years back. Then 2008, the economy crash, which lasted a couple of years. Then now 11 years later, we have another problem, right? And I'm a big buff of history. If you look at the last pandemic in the last century, right after the pandemic came the Roaring 20s. Life is cyclical. Life is full of crises, not to mention the crises we create in our own lives, where we have divorces or financial issues or health issues, right? So if life is full of crises, how do we prepare better? How do we at least deal with some of the things we can control, which is the financial part, and be ready for the next one, so that in fact it becomes, and we're going to talk about this, I hope, in this hour, it becomes an opportunity instead of a horror. How about you?
Absolutely.
How have you dealt with all of this?
Well, I'll tell you, full transparency, at the beginning of the pandemic, my husband and I struggled greatly because he he worked from home pre-pandemic, so he was used to already being home. I was not. But then add to that, so add to our already busy work schedules and having to balance conference calls while sharing an office. Add to that 2 different Zoom schedules with our then 5.5, and 3.5-year-old girls. It was no walk in the park. It was not easy, and there was a lot of tension and stress, to say the least, in the house. But we managed it, and we found our groove, and then it was a game changer when the girls were able to physically go back to school in late October, because then we felt like we could more fully focus on our work without stressing out about, where one of the girls was. And I think that throughout all of this, it has just reminded me of the need to be present and the need to fully focus on whatever it is that you're tasked with focusing on in the moment, so that you create those boundaries for yourself. When it's time to work, it's time to work. And when the kids get home, it's, mommy's still working, I'll see you in a couple of hours. But then when it's time to sign off, it's time to sign off, because it's so easy now that we all work from home to just answer that email and log back on and finish up what you're doing. And don't get me wrong, I have to do that more often than I care to admit. But I think if we create those boundaries for ourselves as women, as mothers, as spouses, and just try to say, you know what, now this is my time for my children. This is my time for my partner. This is my time for myself, which is also important, and which admittedly I need to improve on allowing myself. But I think that if we are focused on being more present in those different spaces in our lives, then this pivot is that much more manageable, and truthfully, we can make it a little more enjoyable, right, than we might otherwise. It's also been difficult for me because my parents, who still live in North Carolina, I haven't seen them since February of last year, which is unheard of for us, because we're used to seeing them every couple of months. They love to come down here. I think they love seeing the girls more than they love me at this point. That's okay. It's to be expected, but it's just made me appreciate my family that much more than I already did. And I think that's important, right? A family at the end of the day is all you've got. And if you can be present with them and focus on them, then, you're doing yourself and them the best of service. But you make an interesting point about achievement of goals. When you talked about this issue of being prepared and making sure that you have all your ducks in a row if God forbid there's another crisis that comes our way. What do you think for women gets in the way of that preparedness, or gets in the way of that ability to achieve goals, or what do you think that we do to ourselves or for ourselves that sort of becomes our own obstacle?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, I've spent the last 5 years traveling the world because my book came out in English, Spanish, and Mandarin. So I've spoken to a lot of women, and I know from myself. And I think the answer to your question is we don't put ourselves first. We think that it's selfish if we put ourselves first. And what happens is we really are managing the ship, right? And if we don't put the oxygen mask on ourselves, and if we're not okay, then the whole family isn't okay. Even if we don't say it, they perceive it. And I think there's that saying, happy wife, happy life, right? But it's really true. So if you are stressed out and depressed, and like I'll give you an example. Suanne and I were talking about this before. I went last week and I did a 1-week fast at a retreat. I was feeling like I had been stuck in my house for a year. I was feeling really kind of depressed, like literally like, oh, get me out of here. And I went and I fasted, which is a hard thing to do, but I did it. And I've come back with like extraordinary energy. And I knew that I needed to do something. Maybe it could have been that, it could have been, I was able to do that because even under COVID, you could do that, but maybe I would have done something else. It didn't matter. I needed to move the energy. And, you know, like you could say, I mean, I guess somebody could say to me, that's kind of selfish. In the middle of a pandemic, you went off to do this. But the truth is, I think we have to own that if we don't take care of ourselves first, if all is not well with the female energy in a family, the family can't grow. And, you know, I think that is very, very, very important. You know, I think back to another crisis of my life when I was 17 and I got this incredible job offer as a teenager to go be a teen TV reporter. And I told my parents I was moving from New Jersey cross country to Texas. And my mother goes, "You are not leaving this house, no te vas de la casa until you're married, hasta que estés casada." And I'm like, "Mom, you don't get it, but I'm gonna go." "Usted no se va, you're selfish, you cannot leave." And I turned around and I walked out and I got in the car and I drove 2 blocks and I cried hysterically because I felt so guilty because we were raised to take care of our parents. But I knew that she didn't understand that it was a once in a lifetime opportunity. And now when she read my book, because I put that story in my book, and she said, "What would have been of us if you had not left that day? ¿Qué hubiera pasado si tú no te vas?"
That's
So
incredible.
I think the answer is all roads lead to us first. How about you? I want to hear from you.
That's really good advice. And as I mentioned previously, I'm not good at that. I'm not good at self-care.
Well, our cultures are not good at it, but we have, you know, both Latino and Asian culture where it's all about sacrifice for everybody else. But like you, I know you have very specific goals and you're at the, you know, like I'm older than you, so you're at the peak of your career. How are you still keeping in touch with your goals through all this?
Yeah, well, you know, I think as cheesy as it may sound, the key is to stay positive, especially when you lead a team. It's important to keep up morale with your team, especially during times like this. And the only way to do that is to remain positive and to not look at, not dwell on the obstacles or the failures or the mistakes that may have come your way or that you know you may have faced, because it's so easy to do that, right? It's so easy to fall into that downward spiral. And, you know, I'm sure we've all heard that adage before where if you fail, you need to fail quickly, learn from it and move on. And, you know, I think that mentality can be sort of applied in the context of this pandemic, at least from a professional perspective, right? Where, you know, yes, times are hard. Remember that everybody's experiencing hard times, and hard times for person A might not be the same as they are for person B. We all have our own set of circumstances that we're dealing with. But you can't let those, you can't let the darkness of those dark times define who you are or define you or make you. If you let them make you in a good way where you learn something from them. You glean from them and you know, see the silver lining. And I know that that's much easier said than done. It takes a lot of mental discipline to do, but if you consciously choose to learn from those obstacles and mistakes rather than dwell on how bad they may have been, then you can move onward and upward more swiftly. And so I think just in trying to keep your eye on the prize and stay goal oriented, it's all about keeping your head up, literally.
You know what, Erica, when you say that, I have to jump in to tell you, again, as someone older and wiser, you're going to fail so many times in your life anyway. Like you're at the beginning of failing because you have to fail. I mean, I always say, you know, if you read our bios, we sound so great, but if you read my failure bio, we'd be crying, right? Both in my personal life and my business life. I
Right.
think we have to be kind to ourselves because failure, I mean, in failure is when you grow, period. And we don't want it, we don't like it. It's like, if it's uncomfortable, but it's inevitable. And I always think that, you know, you have to make fear and failure your best friend because you have to surrender to it. I mean, fear shows up every day. And in fact, I always tell myself, if I'm afraid, I do it anyway. Because so what? I'm afraid. I'm afraid every day anyway. Everybody else is afraid too. I can tell you from having worked for 7 billionaires that the only difference between them and the rest of the world, because they're, you know, they're all different, and is that they are afraid like the rest of us. And they just go, who cares? If I fall, I fail. Who cares? And they become billionaires. So I'm just telling you, like, it's like riding a bicycle, falling and getting back up on the horse. You know, go back on the bike, or you're in a car accident, get back. I mean, if you let fear or failure stop you, you'll never get anywhere. So to me, I think, and thank you for sharing that, because I think it's important for women to hear. Sometimes you see people or you hear that they're in these jobs that sound really great. And yet, as you and I talked about the other day, we've both had really big issues everywhere we've been, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's no getting around it. You are going to meet yourself everywhere you go, and your biggest fears will show up. Right?
Right. It's a great point, and it's something that I know that I have struggled with at various times throughout my career. The fear and sort of the self-confidence issues, and I was told once that you really have to try to fake it till you make it, and I do think that there is truth to that. You have to kind of just tell yourself, quiet those voices that are telling you that you're doomed for failure, or that you're not going to do well today, and just try to rise above that. But it is much easier said than done. You talk, a lot of what you've said so far really harkens back to sort of like a theme that I know that you hold closely to your heart, and you've written books about, and I think are continuing to focus on in other projects. But this idea of being self-made, what does being self-made mean to you, and how has it permeated your life and your career?
Well, it is self-made to me, is this making yourself over and over again. But I think what it means for me is this idea that we have to really, as women, put the money piece at front and center as well. Like, understand that, so many of us come from cultures where people depended on a mate, or you go work for a company and you think that company is your Prince Charming, or your boss is going to save you. El Príncipe Azul, right? Prince Charming.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I feel like Prince Charming doesn't exist. We're it. I mean, I think that we don't realize, your mate, you could end up not being married to your mate, or you could end up, God forbid, your mate passes away, or God forbid something happens. Your company could fire you. Your boss, you keep thinking your boss is going to see your value, but your boss has their own problems, right? So I think that going back to self-reliance, understanding that as women, we always have to have money put away, understanding that to make it to the end of your life, you have to make money, save money, invest that money so that you make money while you sleep, so that money grows, so that you get to old age. Because I don't think people realize you're going to get to be 50 or 60 like that. And when you are, you're not going to want to have money issues. I can tell you, because I spent this whole last year during the pandemic helping small business owner women that were losing their businesses, or that didn't save money, or that were in a major financial crisis. So that's the only thing in life you can control, because math doesn't lie. If you save it and you invest it, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And then other things can go wrong, but at least you're not going to be desperate. You're not going to be in a job that you hate because you're desperate. You're not going to be in a relationship that's abusive because you're desperate. So to me, self-made is all of that: self-reliance, taking care of yourself financially, understanding that there is no Prince Charming that's going to save you, that we have everything we need to save ourselves.
Amen.
Amen. So,
Hey, how about some questions? Should we take some questions?
sure.
Roll in.
Sure.
All right, Erica, how did you decide to become an entertainment lawyer?
Well, I knew when I was a senior in high school that I wanted to be an entertainment lawyer. And
Wow.
it was my form of rebellion because, of course, with your typical Filipino parents, they wanted me to become a doctor. And I said, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to go with forging a career in the law. And I actually got the idea of becoming an entertainment attorney as a senior in high school from an aunt of mine who was sort of in the later stages of her life, just starting to pursue a legal career herself. And she said, you know, your passion for music and movies and sports and pop culture should really be used in a legal career. Why don't you think about that? And so I thought, okay, let me dig into this a little more. And so by 17, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And luckily I've seen it through.
That's amazing. I'm not sure if it's would be mainstream to say, I think I want to be an entertainment attorney when I grow up. I don't hear that often, but yeah, that's amazing. So Nellie, I've got here, there's very good questions. What motivated you to get a doctorate in psychology?
Okay, that's a great question. Well, first of all, I think, you know, I never finished school. I got into the entertainment business very young as an intern and worked my way up, and I did very well. But I always wanted to go to school because, just like Erica, my parents also stressed. I think that was a big, my parents were like, you know, ¿cómo puede ser? How could you leave college? You know, they hated it. But what happened to me is when at mid-career, when I was 45, so I hope this inspires a lot of you, my son was 8 years old and he was not loving school. And he said, Mom, I'm never going to go to college. I hate school. And you didn't finish college and you did really well. And I said, hell to the no. I don't want him to think that. And I was very lucky because, and this goes back to my self-made thing, I had already made money. So when the 2008 pandemic hit, I had already made money. And I thought to myself, I don't want my son to grow up and think that his mom just doesn't believe in education, because I did. And I decided to give myself, again, going back to put the oxygen mask on myself. I thought in that moment, if I were to die in a year, what would I regret? And I thought I would regret that I did not finish school. So I enrolled. And at first I thought, I'm just going to go for a year while the economy gets better. But again, if I didn't have money, if I had not made money already and put it away, I could not have done this. And when I was at the age of going to college, my parents had no money. So it was kind of a gift I gave to myself. I went back to school and I thought I was only going to go for a year. And I ended up taking a 4-year sabbatical. And I did a 6-year program in 4, and I did a master's and doctorate in clinical psychology. And I focused on the psychology of money in multicultural communities. So I really focused on, I think, my issue, the issue of my parents, the issue of all the people I cared about. And I wrote my book, Self-Made, is basically a version of my dissertation that I wrote, and it really changed my life. So I want all the women to know, even if things in your life are not a perfect linear path, most of us don't have a perfect linear path, you can still change your life at any time in your life.
Very inspiring. I love that. 45, you went back.
And by the way, my greatest thing that I'm going to say about this is my son is now in college. He would never again say to me, I'm not going to college. I go, if your mom can write 97 papers, a thesis and a dissertation, you're going to college.
It's not the matter of if, it's where. It sounds like. All right, Erica, with your maiden name as Estrada and being Filipina, do you experience discrimination in your young life?
Ooh. So I remember, growing up in Durham, North Carolina, it was the majority of the people that you would see, you know, in the 80s were either Black or white. Like that was the population makeup of Durham at that time. And so I definitely was in the minority. Even going to the private schools that I went to, I was always one of two Asians in my class. Granted, they were small classes, but you didn't see other people like me. Having said that, there was a very, very active Philippine American Association of North Carolina. A lot of Filipinos had migrated to the Research Triangle Park area because obviously there's a lot of opportunity in the medical field, and a lot of Filipinos were in medical technology, the medicine, pharmacy, etc. So it became sort of a hotbed for Filipinos to move. And I think, I remember, in elementary school, being the subject of racial slurs and, gestures, hand gestures, to the eyes. We all know what those are. And I also remember, as a result of that, wishing that I were blonde. And it was a friend of mine I'll never forget it, in third grade, when I told her this as a result of being the subject of those racial gestures. She said, "But why? Your hair color is so much prettier than blonde hair." And nobody had ever told me that before, right? Nobody other than like the people in my family who look the same as I do. And so to hear it from an outsider, and it kind of like woke me up and made me realize, oh yeah, like not being blonde is okay. And it's actually better than okay. And I'm okay. I'm more than okay with it. And so I really, that was definitely a moment for me in elementary school. And it's sort of, I will never forget that moment. It's sort of like defining moment where I realized that who I was okay. Luckily, over the years in North Carolina, it's a very education-centric place. And so, I think it's gone leaps and bounds from when I grew up there in terms of open-mindedness and things like that. And so I never really felt anything other than that in elementary school, fortunately. Down here, I think it's interesting when, again, people either presume you're Latina, or they kind of, ask, where are you from? You speak Spanish. I can't pinpoint your accent. And so it's not that I felt discriminated against here in any way either. But I'm sort of an anomaly, right? Like people just look at me kind of going, so where are you from? What are you? And I like being able to educate people on the fact that I'm not Latina and that I'm Filipina and what that means. And so, yeah.
I love that. I always love it when people say, "What are you?" I'm like, first of all, I'm not a what. Okay. So anyway, I just find that interesting, but all right, Nellie, how can women become empowered to become financially sound? This is your wheelhouse.
Oh, yeah.
Totally.
I think that, first of all, the fact that you're even asking it means you want to do it. And I think that's super, super, super important. I think in today's world, we can't put all our eggs in any one basket. So I think all of you that work for other people, all of you need to have a side hustle. And that side hustle could be starting 1 hour a week on Sunday, selling one outfit out of your closet that you don't wear. I mean, it's that simple. When I think about how I used to have to sell Avon out of my locker to help my parents pay for my school, I mean, you guys are living in the digital age. It doesn't get easier than today. So it doesn't have to be grandiose. It could be driving an Uber. It could be selling things out of your house. It could be anything that you do, and you take that money and you save it. And that money that you save has to grow into 2 years of salary, and then you're free. Because when you have 2 years of salary, which right now sounds like, oh my God, is she insane telling me I'm going to save 2 years of salary? I really don't care what you have to do that, because I had to sometimes work 4 or 5 jobs to do that. But when you have 2 years of salary saved, 1 year is put away for a rainy day so that you don't have to ever worry of any catastrophe. And that second year of salary, you invest. And you know, my next book is Don't Buy Shoes, Buy Buildings, because I got into real estate. I did not own anything till I was 31. I had $5,000 and I bought one little tiny property. And by 45, I had 16 buildings and I didn't know what I was doing. So it's not, you can figure this out. And the only way you build wealth is buying real estate or stock or investing in a franchise. You have to invest the money. And you have to, that has to be your parallel track. And you have to, that's your side hustle. I can just tell you that you heard me say that I went back to school at 45 because I had already made money, because I have made 5 times the money in real estate than in my entire television career. Because that is money you make while you sleep. It grows, the value grows. And even now in the middle of a pandemic, some of my values have gone down. I don't sell one building, I buy more buildings. So I don't think anybody teaches us that. I don't, especially those of us that come from Asian and Latino backgrounds. I mean, forget it. Nobody's telling us that. Our parents are scared. They're like, oh, I know, you know. No, we have to think bigger so that we can raise better children, right? So it starts 1 hour a week, sell one outfit or something like that, and start putting the money away, and you will get addicted. And that's how this story begins.
That's amazing. Don't buy shoes, buy buildings. How can you, like, you know, that just sticks to your head, you know?
Well, that's my next book, so you better be buying it. Because you know,
I'm going to give you a call afterwards so that you can tell me which buildings I need to start buying.
well, and by the way, you know what? I'll tell you who told me this. You're going to die because you're going to know some of these people. Erica, Jerry Parentio, who owned Channel 4 Telemundo early on, and then he became the president of Univision, owned Univision. He said to me, young lady, when you make money, don't buy houses, buy commercial real estate, because you're a nice Latina. If somebody moves in the house and they can't afford it, you're not going to kick them out because you're nice. But a commercial building is a corporation will rent it from you. You don't care. You make sure they pay you.
It's hilarious.
He was right.
Oh my
Oh
goodness.
my gosh. Erica, what barriers have you faced in your career and how did you deal with it?
Barriers. Well, you know, I'll be honest. I have had the privilege of working for strong Latina women throughout my career thus far. Strong Latina women who have fought for me when they needed to, who have stuck their neck out for me. And I think it's because they value the work that I do. They know that I do good work. They know that I'm ready and willing to put in the work. And, you know, I think there'll always be that sort of, I don't want to say struggle, but there, you know, there's always the fear of the glass ceiling, right? In corporate America, especially as women. And, you know, I don't yet feel, I'm fortunate where I don't yet feel like I'm a victim of that, but I am very cognizant of its presence. And I'm very cognizant also of the fact that, you know, despite what good intentions companies may have, at the end of the day, when put into practice, it's not really, you know, the whole like women's empowerment thing doesn't necessarily see itself through for different reasons, right? And so I'm aware of that, and I think that, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if down the road that does become a barrier or an obstacle. I think that, you know, being in Miami there, which is slowly growing. You know, they say that it's becoming the new Silicon Valley, or the Silicon Valley of the East Coast. So let's hope. But you know, in the entertainment space and in the entertainment and media space, it's pretty limited, right, in terms of the companies that you have available here. So if I wanted to, you know, make a move career-wise, I would probably have to leave Miami. And that is, you know, as my children get older, and as I get older, you know, I don't know that that is something that I'd be ready and willing to do. So it would have to be for the right role and the right position. And so that to me is sort of it's a limitation being in Miami here, right? But in terms of barriers overall, and at the risk of jinxing it, you know, I don't feel like I've really been faced with any thus far that are worth noting. And I'm very aware of the possibility that, you know, as I continue to move up, that things won't necessarily go my way. But I think that throughout what I've learned so far in my career, and certainly throughout this pandemic, and just the ability to pivot and use your energy for different uses, than you exercise different muscles, you know, I think that I'd be equipped to handle whatever that barrier may be.
Yes. Well, Nellie, I'm going to ask you the same question about barriers, because you've done some really pioneering things as well. So what have you faced and how have you dealt with it?
You know, I would say in my life, my barriers have been more personal than business. I think that I have had, you know, I've had a series of bad things in business. I've had bosses, like everybody else, bosses I haven't liked, things that haven't gone well. You know, I've produced 750 shows, they're not all hits. But I consider my barriers have been more personal life. I think sometimes that's why I love giving advice to younger women, because I go, we all spend way too much time on our mates, like, and finding the right man and all that stuff. I mean, I think, you know, I'm such a smart girl, and yet I chose a lot of, you know, I kissed a lot of frogs, and and I had to deal with, you know, my mother saying to me, "This guy's not right for you. What are you thinking?" And I wouldn't listen to her, and then she would be right. So I think I think to myself sometimes, where would I even be? I mean, I'm pretty far along, but where would I be had I not wasted so much time on the wrong people? And I think sometimes that is our childhood wounds that come back, you know, of taking care of people. And I think you choose people that are a project that you have to fix. And I wish, as an older, wise woman, I wish that I could say to all of you, you are going to so regret that if you spend a lot of time on people that you have to save. That's why I said, put the oxygen mask on yourself, because the biggest barrier that I have faced in my life is me. You know, to what you said about sometimes feeling like I'm not enough, I'm not good enough. I mean, we all feel those feelings. I mean, we would not be human if we didn't feel those feelings. But sometimes you let those feelings drown you. And, you know, it's like, I wrote this thing on Instagram the other day. I showed a picture. I think when I was 34, I got picked for the People magazine Most Beautiful People issue. And the picture came out, and I was like, oh my God, why did they pick me? I'm so like, ugh, you know? And now I look at that picture and I go, why didn't I know I was beautiful then? Like, why didn't I enjoy that? Why didn't I accept that? Why wasn't I just like, thank you for putting me in the magazine, instead of, oh no, oh my God. You know, I think we don't know how beautiful or smart. I mean, we're just incredible. Ethnic women are incredible. We do incredible things. We're such great moms. We're such great friends. And yet we still allow the world and society to make us feel small or bad about ourselves. And over time, I mean, one of the good things about getting older is like, now I think I rock, but it takes you a long time to get there. Why can't we get there earlier? So I want you to ask yourself, are you the biggest boundary and barrier in your own life? Do you not think big enough? I have to share something with you guys. I went on the road these 4 years because the book came out in Spanish, English, and Mandarin. I've been all over China, been all over Latin America. It's been great. But on one of my many tours, I met Rigoberta Menchú, who before Malala was the youngest Nobel Peace Laureate from Guatemala. And she was this indigenous woman that, was a maid. She was a maid. And she then wrote a book about the things that were going on in Guatemala. And she became a Nobel laureate. And she said something to me that I think you will all appreciate. She said, indigenous women all wear belts to remind us that half of us is of the sky, and that we must wake up every morning and dream big, grand, bigger than the sky. And the other half of us is of the earth. And we have to take those big, big dreams and bring them to the earth like little seeds and plant them and put water on them, and every day take little baby steps until they grow and become real. And I thought that was deep, because I think we as women don't think big enough. And then even if we think big enough, we don't take the little action. So I'm going to leave you, because I know we don't have that much time left, with what I do. I write every end of the year, what are the 3 things I'm going to accomplish next year? And one could be a work thing, and one could be a physical thing or a personal thing. And the third one could be laser hair removal, which takes a year. So not all 3 can be grandiose. 3 things, not 20 things, not I'm going to lose 100 pounds, I'm going to do this. No, because then you fail. 3 things. Every beginning of the month, what are the 3 things I have to do this month? And I write it down like a diary. I have a diary. 3 things I'm going to do this month so I can complete by the end of the year. Every Sunday night, what are the 3 things I have to do this week to complete that? Maybe I have to make that laser hair appointment. And every night before I go to bed, what are the 3 things I'm going to do tomorrow? So 3 things a year, 3 things a month, 3 things a week, 3 things a day. The turtle wins the race.
Love it. Great advice. And, that's like easy to follow.
It works.
I love it.
Me.
Yeah. Erica.
That's the embodiment of being intentional about achieving your goals. So I'm totally taking that back with me. Thank you.
Erica, what about you? What advice would you give our audience?
So I would say to roll up your sleeves and do the work. And by do the work, to me, it's twofold. On the one hand, it's of course going back to my dad's constant advice to my siblings and me, which is that education is the one thing that nobody can take from you. That transcends life as a student, right? Like you have to keep learning and growing and finding ways to improve yourself, both professionally and personally. And that involves doing work. It involves research. It involves, whatever your craft or your passion may be. It involves just constantly learning about how that area or that industry is evolving, and making sure that you're educating yourself on all of the things going on in your industry or in your craft. And as part of that, doing the work, don't be above any task. I learned that starting from when I was an intern. And I think being an intern really does help in your career, not only because you build a network, you start to build your network, but also because you take menial, at least in my case, what I did was I took menial tasks of making copies, and I would read what I was making copies of, and I would highlight and ask questions, and then take those questions back to my supervisor. And so even though it was just making copies and you're thinking you're not making a difference, you can find ways to make a difference for yourself. And the second part of what I mean by doing the work is to create that network for yourself, And, just establishing rapport with clients, with peers, with teammates, with colleagues, and show them what you can contribute, the value that you bring to the table, but also get to know them on a personal level, because at the end of the day, we're not all robots. And I think in corporate America, it's very easy to become one. And we have to realize that we're all human beings, just trying to earn a paycheck, do a good job, and move on to the next level, hopefully. But in that, if you create and forge, solid relationships and even friendships, those will help you in some way, in ways that you won't even know, to succeed down the line, because you never know when you're going to have to make that phone call at different points in your career. So do that work too, but do that networking part of the work as well.
I love it. So understand your business, roll up your sleeves and have goal setting that is systematic, according to I'm going to call it the 3-3-3-3. So I think that's fantastic advice. Thank you, ladies, so much for sharing your wisdom, your personal stories. It's so appreciated and needed right now with what we're facing. So with that, we are going into the next session, the relational capital, building networks in 2021 and beyond, which is exactly what Erica was talking about. And I also would like to thank our sponsors, of course, Comcast, NBC Universal, AARP, State Farm, UPS. And we also have a mentoring session at 8:30 with APIA Scholars being the sponsor, as well as Wells Fargo, and National Asian Chamber of Commerce is also our community partner. So with that, I hope you took the survey. And with that, I'm going to close the session. Erica and Nellie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you all. And Erica,
Thank
so
you.
I love getting to know you. And Suanne, I love you.
Love you too, both.
Likewise. Let's stay in touch. Thank you, everyone. This is great.
Have a good night.
Bye.